I'm a journalist for film, games, etc. And today I'm lucky enough to sit down with the scriptwriter of Life is Strange. So I'll pass it over to you to introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Christian Devine, and I'm the writer for Life is Strange.
So when exactly did you start working on Life is Strange?
2 years ago this very week.
Wow.
I believe I was hired on May 5th. I do have the date marked in my mind. It was a very important day, so I believe it was May 5th. And I think it was 2 years ago, which is hard. It's amazing to see the arc of that journey from getting that acceptance in the coffee shop to everything that's happened since. It's all about time, right? So.
Were there any scenes in particular that you can pinpoint as being one of the hardest to write?
I would say Kate's rooftop scene, simply because of the tightest rope that everybody on the team is trying to walk all the time is to make sure that nothing's exploitive about what you're doing, the issues that you touch. And so they have to ring true, and it has to make sense dramatically, narratively, and then within the world of the game, and character-wise too. So there's all these you're walking this kind of minefield. So, and like I said, the main thing is to make things feel real and not exploitive to the player and to the situation, and to not trivialize these important issues. And I would say also the Chloe euthanasia scene, because once again, you're trying to create a verisimilitude of a very sensitive situation, and you want to do it right, and it's not a common situation to people. So you have to make the player and the audience believe that Chloe is asking for this, and you as the player are going to be able to grant or not grant. Life is Strange featured a lot of moments that foreshadowed future events, like the song lyrics and the dough figure in the junkyard. Was there any part when you were a bit worried that you were accidentally giving too much away, that you were going to spoil your own surprise by hitting at it too heavily? I mean, there were certainly things that we cut out that were probably too on the nose and a little bit too, you're walking once against a fine line. You want to set up clues. I mean, it would be just little bits and pieces, little things that maybe would be a little too much on the nose. I mean, nothing major, just like I said, the thing is, when you're writing for a game, you're overwriting as much as, you have to overwrite in a way, because every game, if you look at a design doc, they're a stack of 3 Bibles, and 10% of that information may be used in the entire game. You end up with so much more that's cut than is used. And even when you're recording dialogue, there's lots of great dialogue. There's lots of fantastic voice acting from the actors, but the scenes, either they're redundant, or they're telling you too much, or they simply are too long, and you got to let go of a lot of the good stuff sometimes to keep true to the narrative and what you're doing as the game. I know Don't Order said before that the nightmare scene in episode 5 was based off of Max's subconscious, so things that deep down she's accepted or it's questioned. What was the most interesting thing to write in that scene? Well, the nightmare scene is really amazing. The designers did a really great job, and they came up with Michelle and Raul and Baptiste and Simone and all the other ones, designers and artists, came up with really how they wanted the structure for it to go, and it was a matter of plugging in all these emotive moments. Was one of your goals during writing this to sort of disorient the player in some way? Oh yeah, of course. I mean, that's definitely the purpose of the scene, is to throw Max off balance and throw the player off balance a bit, and to force Max, the player, to confront the very epicenter of where this time manipulation has led to, and the consequences of it, and confronting all the people that she's affected and will affect her. So, of course, it's a major moment. Were there any fan theories that came up throughout the course of the game that kind of make you laugh now looking back, because they're so far out? I mean, the fan theories were amazing. I mean, we all loved them, and they were, often quite brilliant and sometimes dead on. I mean, there's, some people really called it early on, and it was, to me, that was one of the funnest things, is watching the fan theories evolve. And I'm not going to say that they were far-fetched, because everything that could happen conceivably is far-fetched in the game. So to me, the fan theories are just as valid. They could be right. I mean, in that universe and the player played in, that could exactly be the way things played out, which is what I love about the game. It's your story. It's how you play the game that determines, where the story goes. It's how you view the science fiction elements of the story that determines it. Do you have a favorite scene or moment from Life is Strange that you think is perhaps the most powerful? There are so many from the inside working on it, you are a little bit separate from a lot of the emotional state in a way, from how the players play it. From the perspective of when you're creating it, you have to put yourself in those emotive states. Michelle would be like, okay, we need, we need some dialogue here for this. And it'll be like, really key emotional dialogue. And, you have to sit there and write something, really fast, and then get in a state of where like it's really powerful emotionally. But that's when as a writer, that's kind of that's one thing you're doing, is you're putting yourself in that headspace. So if I can make myself tear up, or I can make myself like get emotive, then hopefully other people will share that. And other times I'm totally shocked, just because the game does such a great job of the visual design, the music is so amazing, and the voice acting is so incredible. It's pulling you into this world, not just the dialogue, but the whole atmosphere pulls you in and creates emotion.
In episode 1, you can find the fluoxetine tablets that Chloe takes, which instantly is the medication that I take. It kind of made me feel validated in a way, because that was being represented. When you were writing the game, did you realize how much power these kind of small details hold? Because obviously that, in the grand scheme of things, is a tiny detail.
Well, that's good to know, actually, too. I mean, that was the intent of the designers in the game, is to make this world one that's super exploratory and super layered and super rich in texture and environment. So once again, it's a game that you get out of it exactly what you put into it. Some people who just want to speed walk through the game are not going to enjoy it, are not going to get the same layering as people who are really... And then the layering and the exploration pays off, because all these little details add to the character. That's the challenging and the really exciting part, is to come up with things that people can find that will add to the story and the characters. And hopefully even a little detail like that does add to Chloe's, who she is and what she's going through, and other things. And it may not even be what you think it is either. So it can be that too.
By the end of the game, do you think it would be fair to say that the grounded issues and the relationships were definitely the focus over the supernatural stuff?
Yeah, I mean, the game's about friendship. It's about characters. It's about the nature of these characters in this particular environment. And like all great fiction, the supernatural science fiction elements are the metaphor for what's going on. It's a time travel story, and of course the game is about time and regretting time or not regretting time. And as a photographer, of course, you're capturing time. So there's no better metaphor for a lot of emotional states, especially about nostalgia.
Towards the end of the game, some people were hoping for a more detailed explanation of how Max got her powers. Personally, I was okay with that, because it kind of paved the way for this focus on Max's relation with time. If you had the chance, do you think you would have liked to explain Max's powers a bit more? I think
there's many more stories you can tell about Arcadia Bay, how or where Max developed those or didn't. So I think there's many more stories you can tell. And like I said, it's always fun to go more into the lore and the backstory, but it's got to fit within the template of what you're doing. So I'll just say, like I said, there's many more elements of Arcadia Bay that I would love to see explored, and that's one of them. And of course, the fact is, sometimes when you give a direct answer for something, you kind of kill the mystery of it. And this is something that even like Twin Peaks, I interviewed David Lynch once, and he told me this is the problem with Twin Peaks, is that once they solved the murder of Laura Palmer, there was nowhere to go. And no matter who did it, he would not be satisfied, because in a way the mystery is the most enticing thing.
I know that Don't Nod have said if they do get the chance to make a Life is Strange Season 2, it would probably be with different characters, different settings. But do you think it's possible that the team would ever expand to maybe creating comics or novels with the characters already established?
Well, that would be great. I mean, like I said, the characters have become very beloved and people have really embraced them. So I would love to see all those things happen. I mean, like I said, there's many stories you can tell from Arcadia Bay, and this particular story though is done. I mean, the Life is Strange story, the story of Max and Chloe in this particular setting is done.
So in episode 4, in the alternate timeline where Chloe asked you to euthanize her, I noticed that that's the only decision in the game where you have the option to say I don't know as well. Can you speak about why that option was offered there specifically?
It's a really valid option, because you may not know. You don't know what to do in that situation, and it's such an important decision. In the terms of the game, that's one of the most important decisions you'll make, just in the context of that particular moment. So I think it makes sense to have the I don't know, because you just maybe, you know what, Chloe, I have no idea. This, for once, I have no binary here.
In episode 5, Max creates an alternate timeline where she's in San Francisco after winning the Everyday Heroes contest. Was the purpose of that scene to kind of reinforce that Max has become an adult, she's following her dreams, but at the same time she can't live the perfect life?
Yeah, I mean, you want to give Max that moment where she becomes an everyday hero and you see that she's grown up and kind of achieved this dream of hers of being honored by her peers. But of course, it's in this alternate reality where she still has to leave it all behind to save her friends. So it is presenting her with this kind of choice of living in this alternate world or going back to the so-called real one to make things right. Plus, you want to see Max getting to this moment, you know, and interacting with your peers and having this kind of arc.
If there was one thing you could say for you the story is about, what would that be?
Just to be obvious, I would say nostalgia. I mean, I could say friendship. I could say a few things, acceptance, empathy, but I would say probably nostalgia, because that seems to be the key that brings everybody into the game world. Everybody, whether or not they went to an American art college, people seem to respond to the wistful, nostalgic qualities of the game, and everybody remembers back to when they were in high school or when they're in school now. And even when you're in school as a teenager, you're wistful. I mean, you get wistful and nostalgic about breakfast. You know, that's the nature of being young and even being old.
Obviously, a season 2 isn't confirmed, but if it was to be made, would you like to return as scriptwriter?
No, of course, yeah. It's an amazing team. What they set out to do and what they accomplished is incredible, and I'm really just so honored and proud to be part of it, of course, yeah.
If Life is Strange becomes a multi-game series, what defines it as a franchise? What would be brought over from season 1? Would it be the themes, the time travel powers?
Hopefully you wouldn't be repeating yourself, which is the main thing about doing a sequel. It's not just having another same. You can't repeat this. You can't repeat what happened with Max and Chloe, and it would be silly to try to repeat that.
So now I'm going to go on to some questions from the community. This is people from the Life is Strange Reddit. Lex911 says, are there any main contributions or involvement that you made that the other developers didn't necessarily consider before?
Probably the word hella. And I mean, that's one of the reasons. That's one of the reasons that I was brought onto the game. They're known as a French company, although they totally get American culture. The French typically, and Europeans actually, tend to really sometimes get American pop culture much better and quicker than Americans get it, actually.
Also from the same user, they say, which ending did you choose and why?
In my timeline, in my Life is Strange verse, you know, there's multiple streams of reality going on. So in one, it's Chloe's sacrifice, and the other, it's Arcadia Bay's sacrifice. It's painful it's hard for me to choose.
In a way, a lot of the game builds up to that final choice, but you obviously had to balance the choice between everyone in Arcadia Bay, supposedly, and Chloe. How hard was it to balance just a single character with everyone else in the game?
We talked a lot about that, like what would be the choices, and pretty sure I said it'd be 50-50, or it'd be right down the middle. We had some, everybody had somebody on the team can correct me if I'm wrong about this, because at the time I thought I argued that it would be 50-50. It'd be really hard for people to make a decision either way. I mean, nobody in the team was aware of the emotional response to the game. I think we were all taken aback by how powerfully people responded. That is the moment when you watch people play where they freeze and like, it's your final choice, that's it.
So also from the same user, do you have any favorite quotes from the game?
Go yourselfie. Just the little things that Max says that establishes her as a little nerd. When she says release the crack can, I love that because it's such a dorky thing to say. It's a throwaway line you would say by yourself that you wouldn't care, you wouldn't think anybody's listening to your headspace.
This question is from MM273, who says, was the 2-option ending always planned, or was there ever ideas for an ending based on your previous choices?
No, and the story was always set up to have these endings. I know people want more endings sometimes, but more endings doesn't necessarily mean better, it just means more. You know, doesn't mean and I'm sure that if there's 10 endings, you would say, well, couldn't there be an 11th ending where this happens? You can always do that. You know, what I like to say is basically, it doesn't matter if if there's a million endings or there's 2 endings, what happens to the player, that's the journey. That's the important thing, is that Max has been affected. When people say, well, nothing really changed, well, it's Max changed.
Moklov says, how did you decide to use the pop culture references that are hidden throughout the game?
Well, that's one of the fun things, of course, to do. And the fact that you're setting Life is Strange at an art school in Oregon means instantly that you have license to pull in every pop culture reference you possibly can. You know, I would joke that I wanted this to be the most hipster game of all time. It also makes sense within the metaphor of the game, because Arcadia Bay is it's set in 2013 for one thing. People kind of forget that sometimes. It's not set in 2013. So some of the memes are supposed to be a little out of date. And also the way language is, it takes a long time to get to certain places. And also the way Arcadia Bay is clearly as I've said before, it's literally a town out of time. It's not in time.
Was that part of why photography was such a main theme as well, to kind of represent that the game captures a moment in time?
Of course, it just makes sense. I mean, what photography is, and the first line of the game is Jefferson saying, Alfred Hitchcock once famously said that film is, pieces of time, pieces of time. And that right there is setting up what the metaphor for the game too, and a photograph is a piece of time. And that's why they're so powerful, because you look at a photograph and instantly you can be lost and pulled, emotively sucked into this world that might have happened 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 20 years ago, or last week with somebody who's no longer with you.
This question is from A617, who says, what are some of the things, major or minor, that had to be cut out before the game launched?
But you have that in movies and everything, lots of wonderful scenes that work great on their own but don't work within the scope of the story. Maybe down the road there could be a director's cut where some of these scenes could come in, but there's anything major that was done, because once again, it's just too time-consuming, expensive to do something that you're not going to use.
So this question's from P Faster, who says, when writing Chloe, did you expect people to love the character this much? And they say, was it a writer's magic trick that you can never tell, or something else?
It's magic. I mean, is once again, it's in the story that Jean-Luc wrote. I certainly knew, and when they brought me on, they sent over one of the scenes they'd done, which is Chloe and Max and David Madsen in the bedroom. So you immediately saw how cool Chloe was. I mean, everything was there. Her tattoos, the way she looked, the way she danced when she flipped off David Madsen. That was a brilliant touch that I loved. And I was so excited when I saw that, because it was like, wow, this is going to be a great character to write.
MGNTN says, can you say anything about the intentions behind the initial IEP slip on Max's student sheet?
No, I mean, you can read that in a lot of ways. Sometimes they will diagnose students and put them in certain programs based on the testing they do in American schools, and they give them these particular acronyms that may or may not be true. And in Max's case, just what somebody wrote about it doesn't mean it's true or not.
In terms of playing it myself and watching friends play it, I think I've played it about 10 times now, and I discovered a conversation in episode 1 that I never knew existed the other day. It was in Chloe's room. They talk about what they get up to nowadays and how they have fun nowadays, so that's quite cool. Is there any conversations you remember writing that are quite hard to kind of discover? Well,
that one right there is a good one, because I really like that conversation, and that's one that a lot of people don't find, because you have to go up to Chloe after. So there's a couple like that where if you walk up to somebody again and you can have a kind of a nice little moment with Alyssa. There's one, and there's a couple of some of the secondary characters. I mean, there's definitely quite a few of those.
So user Not So Concerned says, who do you ship?
My ships all are sailing with everybody on board.
When you played the game, was your Max with Chloe, with Warren, or with neither?
She was torn. She knows that Warren's got a lot of good qualities, but it's going to be hard for Warren to compete with Chloe, though.
What was it like to write the scene where you discover Rachel's body?
But it's very, very, very hard to write scenes where people are expressing their grief. The two probably hardest scenes in the way to write in the game, I should say scenes, but moments, are the moment where Chloe finds Rachel and the moment where David is told that Chloe's dead. Because it's very, very, very difficult to write an expression of grief properly and not make it come off cheesy. When you're writing, what you're doing is you're putting yourself in the headspace of all these characters anyway. When I'm writing Chloe, I'm seeing the world through Chloe's eyes. What would Chloe say? What would you say in this situation? What could you say? And you don't want to say too much, but it just seemed to make sense that you would be expressing just absolute an inability to comprehend how this could happen to somebody that you loved. And so what kind of a world does this? Who does this? The most basic way that probably everybody kind of would think in a situation like, how does this happen? Why does this happen? It's a very base emotional like plea. So in that case, the simpler the better. But those things are very, like I said, it's really hard to kind of suss out, you know, how you're going to exactly express these points. But Ashley really painfully nails that scene. It's, you know, the acting is incredible, and it's difficult to listen to even. It's hard for me to listen to.
Jonathan from Twitter says, what were some of the challenges present when writing for an episodic game?
Well, obviously the nature is that you're an episodic is that you have to create a tension, a build up to one episode, and that you're not going to be able to solve everything in a straight shoot, so you're layering in things. So that's the trick, is to not give everything away. You create enough suspense that you know people are going to want to hang around for the next episode. When you're writing a linear story, you can start and end. It's a really nice thing to do because you have a beginning and an end. And when you're episodic, you're not so set on the ending. You're set on the journey.
Charlie says, what happened to Kate's rabbit? If you let the storm hit Arcadia Bay, what happened to the rabbit? I think we all need to find out.
Well, it's funny because I think the title for the sequel will be Life is Strange 2, The Revenge of Alice. So I think we're going to find out exactly. I don't think Alice is very happy with anybody. I'm hopeful that she was protected in a bunny bunker.
Jacob says, was there any moments during writing that you kind of sat back and realized that you're involved with something really special?
I mean, I knew what I was, when they sent over the initial, you know, the menu and the first scene and, you know, the story, I knew it was special. Instantly. I mean, the menu immediately told me how special it was. I could see immediately the tone they were going for, which I think everybody immediately gets. You get the tone of the game, but I was very certain this game was going to have an impact. I could tell just the issues they were discussing too, which nobody was discussing in games, and more are. I mean, there are games too that are Gone Home was an influence, of course, on the team, and so there's all these other games that are coming out that were breaking the mold of what a story could be, or the issues you could talk about, or what's a narrative. And I'm much more impressed by people who push the boundaries and maybe don't make it, as opposed to people who just take the very simple way. And to me, there's no risk, no reward. And so I've always wanted to write a game like Life is Strange, always. And I've been waiting for games to hit that point. I literally have been waiting for games to get here. In the 90s, they weren't. Even though there's a lot of great games, but I was waiting for the storytelling aspects and the diversity issues which need to come into play.
In terms of the social issues that the game covers, do you think part of why it was so powerful is that it was an interactive game where it kind of gets you to think about the issues in your own lives and maybe people you know, issues in their lives, and kind of make decisions based off that? So do you think that was kind of even more impactful because it was a game?
In this case, it's undoubtedly the game, the mechanic of freezing time it's what makes the game. I mean, and I know the first time that I saw the first little scene, and when the first choice that they gave me was Chloe or Max busting Chloe for pot or not, narking, ratting out to David if that was Chloe's pot or not. And when I saw that, I froze and I remember the moment. I go, this is brilliant. Okay, this is amazing. They're freezing time. They're making me not rush through something. They're making me stop to make a decision, which is the opposite of what games do, which is always to get going forward usually. So this was freezing time, and it made sense with the mechanic, and plus the mundane choice of not like stopping the supervillain, but ratting your friend out on weed or not. From a personal point of view, for creators now to be able to watch people in real time respond emotionally to what you've created, which, you know, when the first episode of Life is Strange dropped, I could go online that night and watch the world playing it, and, you know, scarily, of course, judging you immediately. And that's an amazing new creative artistic sensibility that creators are going to have now. It's to have this real-time response from watching people cry in real time, watching people say this sucks in real time, watching people say this is awesome. And I love the fact that games are now entering this new kind of emotional level of storytelling.
So unless there's anything else you want to say to the Life is Strange community, that's about all I've got.
I just want to say thank you all. I mean, the greatest thing about working on the game is the fans. The greatest thing is the response. The greatest thing is people sending us letters and messages telling us how the game has touched them and helped them. And if it's done anything, just a little bit, if the game has helped anybody or in any way, that's like the very best reward for all of us. And so we're all just really touched and grateful and overwhelmed by the fan response.
Thank you again for talking with me. I'm sure that the Film Games Etc. readers and the wider Life is Strange community will really enjoy this. So yeah, thank you.